Part 21. I am the Emperor's newly sealed concubine Wen Xian. Standing in front of the Qingliang Palace again. Pu Qiutai looked up and looked at the tall plaque calmly and couldn't help but have mixed feelings in his heart. A palace maid hurriedly stepped out of the hall, curtsied and said, "Mother Noble Wei are often unwell and resting, if the mother concubine Wen wants to see." "I don't want to see her. I'm here to pick up the two children." Pu Qiutai lowered his eyes slightly, didn't look at the palace maid, and said lightly, "Just bring those two children out to me." The palace maid was stunned for a moment, and was about to say something more, when she heard Farong beside Pu Qiutai say coldly, "Didn't you hear concubine Wen's words clearly? Megumi is here, but she's too sick to move. Otherwise, would she be able to afford this sin of disrespect?" The palace maid felt a pang in her heart. Of course she knew that the master was just throwing a tantrum. A male pet dared to come here to humiliate her. Isn't it just that the emperor is still infatuated at this time? A courtier with a heart for the old dynasty is still an eyeless one. I heard that he has never been willing to please the emperor, and now he has to take away the two burdens that everyone avoids. Dare to be pampered and arrogant, counting on yourself to meet it. Isn't that a dream? Who knows, when the emperor gets tired of playing, he will abandon him like a shoe. That's right, Wei Chongzai is not convinced. She still has a prince by her side. What does that male pet have? Dare to come to her Tai Ning to spread wild? Did he forget that a few months ago, in the backyard of this Tai Ning, he was almost poisoned? Now I don't know what to do. Of course, while thinking like this in her heart, Megumi is deliberately forgetting why her position is not promoted but degraded. Ah! There was a sudden scream in the courtyard. This voice, Pu Qiutai, was extremely familiar. It was Zhu Shanyan's cry. This time, he couldn't care about anything anymore. He raised his leg and rushed up the steps. The palace maid wanted to stop him, but she was pushed so much that she almost fell to the ground. "Shanyan, Mingfang!" Pu Qiutai hurriedly walked in the direction of the sound, and saw a small figure rushing out of a side room. And behind him was another person as fast as lightning. "Dare to run? This prince called you, and you still dare to run? Uncle Pu! Uncle Pu, save me!" Zhu Shanyan had just been beaten, and his body was weak. Where was the opponent of the person behind him? And he was caught up after running 2 steps, so that the kid who was half a head taller than him stopped and hugged him. It was also at this time that he saw Pu Qiutai rushing over here, so he couldn't help but stretch out his hand and shout for help. "Shanyan!" Pu Qiutai panted and ran to Zhu Shanyan's side, snatched him from the hands of the Crown Prince Xia Dongming, and then held him in his arms to examine it carefully, and asked anxiously, "Shanyan, are you okay? What about your sister?" "My sister is in the house." Zhu Shanyan's tears fell down. "Woo woo, he wants me to play with him. I don't dare, woo woo. Uncle Pu. I want to go home. I want to see my father and mother, woo woo. I'm scared." "Good baby, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid in the future." Pu Qiutai held Zhu Shanyan's little head in his arms. Tears flashed in his eyes, and then he turned back to Farong and Luliu, who had just rushed over, and said, "Mingfang is in the house. You take her out. Let's go." "Wait." Before Hibiscus and Luliu could agree, Xia Dongming, who had a gloomy face on the side, finally spoke. "What does His Royal Highness Crown Prince command?" Pu Qiutai looked directly at Xia Dongming. His thin body was straight. "I don't know why, this is clearly still a child." But the coldness and momentum in the other party's eyes made him unable to give birth to any contempt. "His Royal Highness Crown Prince, this is the Emperor's newly sealed concubine Wen Xian. The Emperor has decreed." Since then, Zhu Shanyan and Zhu Mingfang, the two children, have been raised by concubine Wen. This time, The slaves and maids are following the mother to pick up the 2 children. Furong saluted Sha Dongmingfu and took Pu Qiutai's words. Concubine Wen? Sha Dongming muttered hatefully. Looked at Pu Qiutai coldly, and his tone was indescribably vicious. There will be a man in my father's harem. This is really unexpected by this prince. But things in the harem are unpredictable. Concubine Wen, you can do it yourself. After he finished speaking, he glanced at Zhu Shanyan, who was huddled in Pu Qiutai's arms. His little fist couldn't help but clench, and he pointed at the other party and said, "Okay. Since you have climbed to the high branch, you have been sitting firmly on the high branch since then. In this harem, out of this man's palace, you dare to come out. Let me see that I will never spare you." After he finished speaking, he turned around and left with his head held high, but the chill in his eyes made Pu Qiutai shudder a little, and secretly said that this child was too mean and vicious at a young age. But I heard Furong say helplessly, His Royal Highness Crown Prince's mother died in childbirth. It was the Queen Mother who raised him until now. Although the Queen Mother treated him well but lingering on the sickbed. After all, he lacked some love for his ears and temples. And because His Royal Highness is the prince, so the requirements are extremely strict, so it has developed His Royal Highness's current temperament. Don't be surprised. Pu Qiutai sighed, shook his head and said, in this harem, I'm just Ming Jie to protect myself. Who am I qualified to blame? After speaking, he saw that Luliu also hugged the scarred Zhu Mingfang. So he nodded and said, okay, let's go back. Yunhai Palace is also the main hall of a palace. Because of the name of the atmosphere, the layout is elegant and exquisite. Has always been liked by Xia Linxuan. Until now there are no concubines to stay, but Xia Linxuan is interested, will sit in this palace. Now this Yunhai Palace has a master. Naturally no longer lonely, the Internal Affairs Office sent hundreds of people, will be inside and out to clean up. In addition to the main hall where Pu Qiutai stays. Other side halls such as Lu Ning Zan, Xinghua Pavilion, Ming Lan Courtyard, Yan Lai Pavilion and the Qing Liang Pavilion in the backyard pool, have also been carefully cleaned. Those who can survive in this harem are basically human spirits. The emperor sealed a male pet as a concubine. This male pet used to live in the Heart Cultivation Palace. And now he lives in the Yunhai Palace, which is not far from the Heart Cultivation Palace and has no master. The emperor's favor for this male pet, so do you need to say? Because Pu Qiutai entered the palace with the front foot, the Internal Affairs Office sent 60 eunuchs and palace maids to come over. Just because the 8 palace maids such as Furong Luliu were favored by the emperor in the past, and now they have been given to concubine Wen. So naturally they are the big girls who serve in this palace. So, in addition to the chief eunuch Jing Lianghou, the other eunuchs and palace maids are mostly rough and miscellaneous servants. Sprinkling and sweeping the courtyard and moving things, and 10 clever palace maids and eunuchs are watering flowers and feeding birds, passing food and boiling water. And doing these relatively close things. Pu Qiutai knew that the harem was sinister, and among these people, I don't know how many other palace masters eyeliner had. So, they were too lazy to speak. So they only took Zhu Shanyan and Zhu Mingfang into the hall and ordered Furong to find a doctor to come over to diagnose and treat the 2 children. Furong ordered someone to pass on the imperial doctor, and here she led Jing Lianghou to Pu Qiutai, and said with a smile, Mother, this is my fellow villager. Originally the eunuch in charge of the respectful room, and he is very kind. This time the emperor deliberately allocated him to Mother. I am afraid that it is also because of peace of mind. As for the others, it can't all be said that there is a camp. We have to visit slowly. There is a loyal one. Just use it well. With a heart and an eye, it will be over. But this is the idea of the slave. I don't know what the mother thinks. Pu Qiutai looked at Jing Lianghou twice. This eunuch is actually very handsome, although his face is white and beardless. It is rare that he does not have the feminine air of fat powder, and he seems to be very young. I am afraid that he is not yet 30, and he can be the eunuch in charge of the affairs room. Which shows that he is not a simple person. He nodded and said, "The reason why I entered the palace, Farong knows best, and I am also too lazy to care about these things. Those palace maids and eunuchs, you just watch slowly. If I am favored for one day, and I will not treat you badly, I will not be wronged, if I lose power in the future. You don't have to stick to the relationship between master and servant, and it is most important to find a good place to live." The mother said this kind of thing again for no reason. Farong couldn't cry or laugh, knowing that Pu Qiutai had been persecuted by the emperor one after another. And he really didn't have any confidence in the road ahead, or, as long as he could protect Zhu Shanyan and Zhu Mingfang, he didn't care about being favored or falling out of favor. However, as a harem slave, she is naturally unwilling to listen to her master say such depressing words. Pu Qiutai didn't say anything anymore. Looking at Shanyan and Mingfang looking at the interior layout with curiosity in their eyes, and cautiously wanted to lie on the couch, he couldn't help but show a loving smile on his face. And said with a smile, "Lie down obediently, wait for the imperial doctor to come and treat you." Farong and Jing Lianghou withdrew. Jing Lianghou wiped the sweat on his forehead, and wondered. "Farong, what's the matter with this master? The emperor's favor for him shocked the harem. He was good, what did he say?" That's so different, isn't it?" Farong smiled. "Nonsense. If it is everyone, can the emperor still use him as a treasure? You just put 10,000 hearts, others don't know. I'm afraid it's not the master, I can see it clearly." Speaking of this, she looked around and saw that there was no one else, so she came to Jing Lianghou and whispered, "I only tell you this, and you are not allowed to tell anyone to go, so as not to invite disaster for the master. The emperor is only afraid that he is sincere to this master." "Really? It can't be, right? Which of concubine Luo is not the beauty of the country and the city, exquisite? It's Wei Chongzai who is." Jing Lianghou startled Farong's words, and hurriedly whispered. And before he could finish speaking, he interrupted her, and heard her sneer, "Wei Chongzai is here? Don't you know how she became a permanent presence? Obviously, on that day, she could have become a concubine." Jing Lianghou nodded. Who in the palace didn't know that Wei Chongzai was made Chong because of this master, and he was made Chongzai? That was the woman who gave birth to the prince. This result is really chilling to think about. "Ah, Emperor." Other. Lighter. "Ah." In the bed of the main hall, there were blushing and heart-pounding sounds and moans, accompanied by Xia Linxuan's teasing. For a long time, the movement was quiet, and finally fell silent. Xiao Beiji waved his hand quietly, and a few little eunuchs carried the large bath bucket and placed it behind the screen, and then quietly retreated. This is the rule of Xia Linxuan when he was fortunate to be in the Qiutai. Knowing that he loves to be clean, so every time the clouds and rain are harvested, he must personally wash his body. "Are you satisfied with your stay here?" After washing, the two changed into clean dressing gowns and lay down on the big bed again. Xia Linxuan hugged his lover and asked him how he felt on the first day of staying in the harem. Thank you, Your Majesty." Pu Qiutai lowered his eyes, thought about it and sat up again, and said softly, "The minister will go out." "What are you going out for? Is it convenient?" Xia Linxuan frowned, and was just about to ask the eunuch on night duty outside to come in with a toilet nightpot, when he saw Pu Qiutai shaking his head and whispering, "Minister." And the minister went out for a while. "Okay, I'll be with you." Xia Linxuan only thought that Pu Qiutai was a little temperamental and felt that his lover was so pampered and arrogant. So he also sat up. Pu Qiutai was startled, and hurriedly waved his hand and said, "No, minister. It's good for the minister to go out for a walk by himself, and I will come back in a while. And the emperor doesn't need to accompany this courtier." As he spoke, he was about to climb out of bed with his hands and feet, but unexpectedly Xia Linxuan grabbed his slender waist and listened to the young emperor ask lightly, "What are you going to do? Are you afraid I will know?" "Minister." The minister wanted to go and see Shanyan and Mingfang, and they slept here the first night. Pu Qiutai had no choice but to whisper back. Xia Linxuan's eyebrows rose suddenly, and he was about to press the person back to the bed domineeringly. But his eyes immediately saw Pu Qiutai's hand holding the quilt trembling slightly, so like iron bars his heart couldn't help but soften, and after a long silence, he said with a sullen face, Go back quickly." "Yes, thank you, Your Majesty." Pu Qiutai's heart was raised in his throat, but he didn't expect Xia Linxuan to agree, so he couldn't help but be overjoyed. Hurriedly bowed, and got out of bed and hurriedly walked out. The remnants of the two previous dynasties actually let him take it so seriously. The dignified son of heaven was talking to himself in bed, dissatisfied, deeply feeling that he had been neglected. But thinking of the two of them in bed a moment ago, His Majesty Emperor felt a little more balanced in his heart. After revisiting it twice, His Majesty Emperor suddenly reacted, leaned over and asked Xiao Beiji outside, "What time? How long has Qiutai been out?" Xiao Beiji was there calculating when his master would be able to remember this stubble, and suddenly heard a question, and hurriedly came in and said respectfully, "Back to the Emperor, it has been 3 watches now, and Master Pu has been out for nearly 2/4 of an hour. Do you want a slave to take a look?" Xia Linxuan's anger jumped up as soon as he rubbed, and said angrily as he got out of bed, "I told him to go and come back quickly. He went faster than a rabbit. And he came back faster than a turtle. No, slower than a snail. It's just the opposite of him. I went to see it myself." Before he finished speaking, he heard hurried footsteps outside the door, and then Pu Qiutai's figure appeared at the door, and seeing that Xia Linxuan was wearing his shoes, he hurriedly took a few steps forward and knelt down and said, "Back to the Emperor, 2 children. They're scared, my lord." The minister comforted them, and came back late, asking the emperor for forgiveness. Xia Linxuan looked at the flush on his pale face, obviously rushing all the way back. Most of the anger in his heart dissipated unconsciously. After thinking about it, he saw Pu Qiutai's eyes flickering and peeking at him, so the last bit of anger was gone. He stretched out his hand to pull him over, and snorted coldly, "Don't take it as an example, otherwise you will bear the consequences." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Pu Qiutai sighed in his heart, just looking at Xia Linxuan's appearance. He also knew that the other party was very dissatisfied with him. In order to live a smoother life in the future, he would be extremely obedient. Otherwise, once this bastard remembers this anger and settles the account on Shanyan and Mingfang, it will really be more than worth the loss. Not to mention, he was used to seeing Pu Qiutai's stubbornness in the past, and looking at his obedient appearance today, Xia Linxuan felt that he was happy, so he didn't care anymore, hugged his beloved, rubbed his shoulder, and soon fell asleep. Pu Qiutai couldn't sleep. His thoughts were surging. For a while he was the brothers and parents of the former residents. For a while he was a friend in Xilan. For a while he was the prince of the former dynasty and the 2 children. And for a while he was the domineering king around him. He only felt that his heart was hot and cold, and his eyelids were heavy, but he couldn't sleep. It has passed the 3rd watch, and everything is quiet in the imperial city of Nuo Da. But it is not only Pu Qiutai who can't sleep. Today is his first day in the palace, and he lives in the Yunhai Palace, becoming concubine Wen Xian. How many of the concubines in this palace can sleep?